Welcome everybody to our special seminar with Dr. Inge Manyoso. We would also like to recognize the attendance of Dr. Nora Cabral. And of course, our Dean, Dr. Maria Teresa Velasco. The faculty of the College of Devcom. Let me start with our teacher, Dr. Suva. Of course, Ma'am Tabs, Ma'am Elaine, Ma'am Tirol, Ma'am Milen, Ma'am Yas, Ma'am Trina. Welcome everybody. So today we have a very special guest, Dr. Inge Manyoso. I hope some of you might have read some of the things he wrote, and he wrote extensively about Devcom, and he recognizes the contributions of development communication from the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. Dr. Lee also currently lectures at the RMIT University in Melbourne, Australia. So without much further ado, I give you Dr. Lee Manyoso.
Blessed man, because even though I'm short, as you can see, the distances I've been able to travel are very long, are very tall. I can use a euphemism in my language, largely because of the work of Nora Cabral. I also want to mention that it's very hard to come to Los Baños. It's something I've mentioned with the dean, mentioned to Pamela, and of course Professor Cabral. It's very hard to come to the Philippines and talk about development communication, because everything I knew and everything I know and everything I will know about development communication will always be here. So to come here and pretend that I know a lot of things about Devcom would be a fallacy. But what I'm going to do today is to take you through what I believe is a fundamental principle in Cabral's work, because apart from being a student of society, I am largely a student of Nora Cabral's work. And I'm honored that I've had the opportunity to study her work, to talk to her, but most importantly, also to have had the opportunity to have Nora Cabral recognized within the context of Western media and communication studies, not only as a pioneer of the field of communication for development, but as a mother as well, who has nurtured the field to the current state in terms of theory and practice. So my standing here should not be mistaken as a lecture. I know you want to define it as a lecture, but it's a celebration of somebody we admire so much and respect so much in terms of the work that he has done in terms of theory and practice. Over 50 years ago, a small group of Filipino scholars embarked on a journey that will change the way we think about development today. By development, I'm not just alluding to the figures and numbers that are employed to scientifically explain the human condition. I'm also referring to the development that my great-grandmother used to talk about. The development that one can eat, the development they can touch, the development they can drink. In fact, I'm talking about all these essentialist and existentialist notions of development that allows people like my mother, my grandmother, and my great-grandmother to live close to their ancestors and ancestral graves. So over 50 years ago, this small group of Filipino scholars recognized that it is one thing to have very fancy knowledge management and exchange models that discussed the possibility of transferring agricultural knowledge from universities, from centers of excellence, to the end users, i.e. the farming communities. That what was important was to define and find and curate a creative way of transferring and exchanging this knowledge. So for the first time, these pioneering scholars were concerned with humanizing development and ensuring that people like my grandmother contribute to the definition and contestation of development itself. And it was the spirit, not just the context, it was the spirit in which the first degree program was curated in the 1970s, and of course, this is the same spirit that resulted in the establishment of this wonderful college that we define as the College of Development Communication. In this brief reflection that emerges out of my forthcoming book, Speaking Development with People, I try to summarize the fundamental thoughts that I have studied from Nora Kibro, because I know that oftentimes when we're discussing Kibro's work, we're talking about the way she defined the field, the ideas she talked about in terms of development communication. But there is a certain element that I think is very fundamental, and that makes it so distinct a brand of development communication that I think we should spend time to study and explain. So this is what I define as the pedagogy of listening, in which emphasis is not just on the transfer of information, but the emphasis is on building the skills and tools of our graduate students so that they are able to live and engage with people. This was the fundamental thought in the work of Nora Kibro. So what am I talking about? Writing in the 1960s, in the London Times supplement of 1966, the British Marxist historian Edward Palmer Thompson propounded the notion of history from below as a form of historical reconstruction that requires scholars to read, unpack, and appreciate historical events from the perspective of the subaltern, those that the postcolonial scholar Gayatri Spivak described as having no access to lines of social mobility. So Thompson would indeed test his new methodological trajectory through the publication of his timeless classic, The Making of the English Working Class, which would cement the notion of history from below as a key theoretical, scholarly, as well as methodological tradition within the social sciences. And I would encourage you to find an opportunity. I'm sure the library must have a copy. This is a beautiful book. It talks about life, especially for marginalized groups within Victorian England, especially during the time, the rise of the Industrial Revolution. So it's a beautiful book. In the preface to this book, Thompson would note something that is very important. He says, I am seeking to rescue the poor stockinger, the Ludite cropper, the obsolete handloom weaver, the Ethiopian artisan, and even the deluded follower of Joanna Southcote from the enormous condensation of posterity. Now, referring to these marginalized people, he says, their crafts and traditions may have been dying, their hostility to the new industrialism may have been backward-looking, their communitarian ideals may have been fantasies, their insurrectionary conspiracies may have been foolhardy, but they lived through these times of acute social disturbance, and we did not. Their aspirations were valid in terms of their own experience. And if they were casualties of history, they remain condemned in their own lives as casualties. In emphasizing the quest to rescue, Thompson was not being dismissive of the agency of the working class, of the marginalized groups. Rather, he was actually emphasizing the agency of these groups to make and unmake their own history, if we have to borrow Paulo Freire's words. He actually was in a way acknowledging the agency of these groups in mastering the art of employing radical communicative acts as pathways towards achieving self-actualization and empowerment. This point is critical because when we read Nora Kibro's work, she provides a wonderful context that enabled the scholars in the 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s to pioneer Devcom as a theory, as a practice, and of course as a form of research. Now, what we might ask are the most fundamental principles of Devcom that Nora was talking about. And why does it matter today? First, to begin with, Thompson talks about rescuing the marginalized groups from the enormous condensation of posterity. The moral ethos is well illuminated by the pioneer of liberation theology, the Latin American Catholic father, Father Gustavo Gutierrez, in his wonderful book, A Theology of Liberation, where he introduces the notion of preferential option for the poor. Now, for some of us who are students of Nora's work, there is a tiny book, it's very powerful, it's like a poison. It's called Development Communication Primer. She emphasizes in that book that Devcom, as a theory, as a paradigm, as a way of thinking, was and remains a trajectory that represents the views and aspirations of marginalized groups. In fact, she goes even further to celebrate in that book that even in the global north, they have their own backyards of underdevelopment. So the principal ethos in the wonderful work of Nora Kibro, and which is well articulated by Gustavo Gutierrez and of course Edward Thompson did, is that Devcom as a theory, as a practice, and of course as a methodology, is interested in representing the aspirations of marginalized groups. Now, I'm not sure whether Nora Kibro had read Karl Marx's work, the 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, in which Karl Marx is really interested in trying to explain how dictatorship works in France, especially after Napoleon. But there is a quote there in that wonderful book, 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, which says, they cannot represent themselves, they must be represented. Now, what Marx was talking about, he was not being dismissive of the ability of marginalized groups to articulate their own interests. What he was concerned about is the inability of marginalized groups to develop consciousness. So the development communication that I've studied from Kibro, that I continue to study from Kibro, and of course, the larger Musvany's School of Development Communication, emphasizes the development of consciousness, especially of marginalized groups. So it's not just a question of going out there and creating all these wonderful programs or creating all this wonderful communication content. It's also taking time, sitting back a little bit, and learn to understand the people that we are dealing with. That's why it's very paramount that students like you, wonderful students like you, should have the requisite skills and tools that allow you to engage and live with people, because those are critical skills that most of the time you cannot gain or you cannot obtain in a journalism school. Training has to be set up in such a way that allows students to acquire these skills. So when I'm talking about living with and engaging with people, of course part of it is having the ability to establish conversations with people. But also it's an opportunity to actually learn from the people themselves. I remember a long time ago when I did my master's, my field work was in Kalahari. So I went into the Kalahari where I met a lot of indigenous people to try to understand the way they understood issues of representation. It was a Marxist project. I am also a huge fan and student of Marx. And we met an old lady there. Her name was Mitten. So when we sat down in the evening, we were asking if she could tell us stories. And she said, oh, Lindsay, I cannot tell you stories. Because you want to drive away with my stories and take them to the city. And then you want to tell these stories as if they are your own stories. So the point I'm referring to here is the ability to develop trust with the people we are working with. So when I'm talking about having the skills to engage with, is the ability to create that trust, so that people are able to trust us in terms of the work we are doing. First, to begin with, Thompson talks about rescuing the marginalized groups from the enormous condensation of austerity. What Thompson is calling for, and this is supported by the observation from Father Gustavo Gutierrez, is a new kind of scholarly pedagogy in which historical writing, and of course Devcom is part of it, takes on ethnographic and moral responsibilities. Ethnographic in that the studying of history of the common people should now no longer rely on a positivist and empiricist ethos, but rather involve building long and trusted relationships with subjects of study. This implies that our work in agriculture communication, in rural development, as well as Devcom, should aim to articulate the aspirations of people on the ground, to give voice and prominence to their thoughts, to their ideas, to their innovations, as well as to their knowledge. So what we're talking about is to enable the voices of people like my mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, to come into the policy-making room, the policy-making forum, even if they are not there. In my conversations with Rebrello this morning, when he talks about the time when he worked as a development broadcaster and a station manager for Radio DZLB, he says, and he emphasizes this, that his focus was always on bringing the community into the studio, even if people were far away from the studio. That was the main focus of his work. And you might wonder, how do we do that? In this case, therefore, to do Devcom or to practice Devcom, as in designing and implementing policies, implies that we take the side of the poor. Now, that's very important. You're taking a political stand here. It becomes very political because you're taking the side of the poor. The marginalized and the classless in society, those that are always left behind by modernity as well as development. That we understand and embrace their viewpoint, which then becomes an intellectual or epistemological pedestal upon which we formulate various policies. To write history, or to practice Devcom in this case, means that we are going to battle, we are going to war against the structural inequalities that perpetuate what Amy Caesar, the post-colonial thinker, defines or construes as the signification of the subaltern. The second point that is very important, especially in the work of Norake Bro, and that is picked up in the quotation from A.P. Thompson, is that the people that we are dealing with are the ones who are the experts. You're not the experts. We are not the experts. In fact, sometimes I want to stop people from introducing me as an expert wherever I go, and they say, oh, he's a Devcom expert. I'm not an expert. Experts are the people who live through the various problems and are able to master those challenges in order to find a new way of defining what their future can be like. The author that I mentioned, Gayatri Spivak, who published a beautiful article in 1988, which I think is the first time that allows post-colonial theory to marry gender thinking, especially in the context of development. The article is called Can the Subaltern Speak? You can download it, it's free, available for download. Can the Subaltern Speak? Now, for some of you, this article may be difficult to understand, but I'll summarize it. Spivak is very critical of Western, of modernist approaches towards development in the global South. She's criticizing especially the UN approaches towards women empowerment, because her argument is there is a lot of misunderstanding of how women in the global South, marginalized women, actually resist or contest power in their own society, which I share as well. Now, she gives an example of a woman in that article, which turns out to be her grandmother. But she talks about an Indian woman who was almost illiterate. Her name was Bhubaneswari. Now, in the 1920s, when India was colonized by Britain, Bhubaneswari committed suicide. She killed herself. Now, for a lot of the British colonial authorities and institutions, they thought it was just suicide. But then when Spivak went back and started investigating the nature and the manner of the suicide, she found that the woman was menstruating. She was, experiencing her menstrual periods at that particular point in time. Now, she wanted to find out why she had done that. So the article is about the ability of women, especially marginalized women, to use even their own body to contest what is going on in society. Now, for any student of society, for any student of Devcom, to understand those things, you really need to have open ears and open minds in order to understand how women are speaking in society. So if you come in my community, for example, you go to certain forums, you find that they're male-dominated. And my mother is going to keep quiet. She's not going to say anything. She's one of the most intelligent persons you can ever meet. My father, who has no clue, and sometimes I wonder, will be speaking in some of his forums, and my mother will not be there. But in the evening, when we sit down and we are eating, my father explains what he heard in this forum. And my mother analyzes the issue for my father and explains a particular position. In fact, when my father goes back to this forum, he speaks and everybody thinks, in fact, even now, people think my father is a very intelligent man. So the question is, if you're looking at this particular voice, who is speaking? Is it my father? Is it my mother? So it takes certain skills to actually unpack and understand the voices that are there in society. Because sometimes we might go into a place and think, women are not speaking in this space. Women are very silent. They are male-dominated. Let's bring in interventions in order to actually fight against gender-based violence, fight against all these things that we think are happening in this society because women are silent. You go in a community, just coming from working with international development organizations, much of the literature talks about the culture of silence in some of our cultures in Africa, that people don't talk about sex. In fact, outside the framework of development, you find people, there is nothing they talk about. All the time they are talking about sex. But until you enter those spaces, you're not going to find anything. You ask them certain questions, you ask these questions in certain ways, people are going to keep silent. They're not going to give you honest answers. In fact, when you do research, you go out, you knock on the door, a woman opens the door, the first thing she tells you in most of the places I've been to, says nobody is here because the husband is not there. So nobody is here, can you come another time? But she's there. And you find the researchers proceeding to talk to other people. But the woman is there. You have to find a space, you have to create a space in which you can have a conversation with this woman. In fact, you find that she's much more knowledgeable about the things that are taking place within the community. The second aspect that Thompson observes, as I said, is the emphasis that communities live through these times. They live through these challenges, and we did not. It doesn't mean that if you're not a particular person, or if you're not originating from a particular perspective, you have no right to talk about certain things. That's not what he means. In fact, through research, through learning, and through exposure, we do have opportunities to talk about a lot of things. In fact, if you look at the history of the fight against racism in South Africa, in America, it was white people who even never experienced racism who were at the forefront because they were able to understand what was going on. In South Africa, you found we had a lot of people who were white and privileged, but they left all that privilege behind to fight against apartheid. Even though, by their race, they were benefiting from the system itself. So, what I'm saying here is you have a right to come in my community, for example, in Africa, to talk about my mother. You can write about my mother, but you have to do certain things in order to have that authority. In the wonderful book, which you can also download online, Their Eyes Were Watching God. It's a beautiful novel. Zora Hurston, the writer, presents this wonderful woman. She has just turned 40. The name is Jenny. So Jenny elopes with a younger man, and the town is not happy that such a woman has eloped with a younger man. The town doesn't like that. And when she comes back, there is so much rumor in the community. Oh, this woman ran away with a younger lover. The younger lover is dead. Look, this woman is impoverished. A lot of people are talking about this love affair. And Jenny doesn't care about it, but she gives authority to one woman, Phoebe, in that story, to represent her. She says, if people ask you about this story, you know what to say. So the act of conversing with my mother, the act of sitting down with my mother, having tea with my mother, will give you the authority to talk about my mother. So the issue of voice also comes with authority. That's why the issue of representation, whether in development or in the social sciences, is a political issue, because it implies that you take a political stand in terms of the stories you're talking about. And this is what Nora Kibro talks about in Devcom. That when you're telling these stories, you're not telling them to be neutral. You can't be neutral. Yes, you can be objective in terms of your analysis, but your political stand implies that you believe in the stories you're told. You have to have an interest in the things you're told, in the things that you see in front of you. You cannot go in a community, see so much gender-based violence, and be neutral about it. You have to be affected by whatever is going on. In fact, both Kebro and Thompson are encouraging us as experts, if I may use that word, and scholars to undertake an ethical journey that is very sacred, with empathy, with understanding, with compassion, and careful study for purposes of coexistence and enlargement of our horizons. That's what Edward Said talks about in the preface to the wonderful book, Orientalism. So we're not researching other people's lives for the sake of it. We're not just writing all these things for the sake of it, but we are doing it with empathy. Now, empathy is different from sympathy. If I see you hungry, I can really feel sorry for you. I can say, I'm really sorry you're hungry. And then I do nothing about it. When you're empathetic, you do something about it. You place yourself in somebody's shoes and you do something about it. It's a step beyond sympathy. So you take this sacred duty of writing and working with people with empathy. Es muy importante. Empathy, understanding, compassion, for purposes of coexistence and enlargement of horizons. Well, we may argue that we do invite community groups and organizations to the policy-making gatherings. So when we go out to make our annual programs, we may sit down with people to talk to them about whatever it is that we want to talk about. Now, the issue I'm talking about here is the prevention of manipulation. To prevent the manipulation of people's voices by misinforming them, by making them rubber stamp agendas that they are not really aware of, by outwitting, outmaneuvering them in the policy-making discussions. So you frame the discussions in such a way that people cannot contribute comfortably. It's about being sincere with the work we do, being honest and being humble about it. Because in the process of doing this work, sometimes it's really humbling. We are taught how, it reminds us how ignorant we are sometimes. Professor Librero was defining whatever he was doing when he was station manager of Radio TZLB, and he said sometimes you may look stupid when you do this work. You may look stupid, but you have to be prepared for it. It's not stupid as in stupid, but perhaps he meant, you may be humbled by the experience of the lessons and interactions. So this poses challenges for both formal and informal training programs in communication for development, or Devcom as you define it here. Now, how do we produce students, graduates, and professionals who have the tools and skills for living and engaging with people? In a 2006 media development article, Alfonso Gumucio and Venecia Rodriguez described a new type of communicator who is equipped with all the necessary know-how, competences, and commitment to work hand in hand with those engaged in development. The lesson here is that Devcom should begin with and end with people. That's my understanding of Nora Kebro's work. It should begin and end with people. What I think Nora Kebro meant was that Devcom should capture people's way of looking at the world. Now, I'm not just talking about their voices. I'm talking about a perspective here. If you speak German, there is a word called Weltanschauung. So I'm talking about how you look at things, how you look at men, how you look at women. And I think that's what Kebro was talking about. You should be able to explain it in a way, you should be able to capture the voices in such a way that represents the way people originally intended their voices to be articulated. The third aspect of the observation is about, coming from Thompson that is about people living through times of acute social disturbance. So I'm trying to wind up here to summarize Nora's thoughts. What it implies is that local people are the best representatives of their own agendas. No matter how extensive our field work is, the local people know what is really important, what is really significant in their lives. But we can still ask a question. Do local people always know what is best for them? They might know their issues, but do they always know what is best for them? For example, if you go into a community, they think beating up women is good. Are you going to hand back and say it's okay, we don't want to interfere with the way local people look at issues? Well, Paulo Freire seems to have an answer, because he says it becomes a matter of tactic now. It becomes a matter of the strategies that you use when you're out in the field. That's why the skills that you gain from the training program that you have been involved in are very paramount. They're very important, because they allow you to enter those liminal spaces that a lot of people, a lot of experts might not be allowed. It's not easy to go in certain places to talk about certain issues. Some of the issues are very sensitive. But when you have mastered the art, the science of engaging with people, you find the liminal spaces with which to engage with people, even on very sensitive issues. The field of communication for development today experiences an emphasis of modernist theories and approaches. Yet, as the intellectual ruptures caused by the 2008 financial crash have demonstrated, there are other ways of theorizing, thinking about, explaining, and deconstructing the world that have emerged in other parts of the world. These knowledges are largely oral, passed on from generations to generations, even if there is a penetration of technology. The spoken word has remained a critical currency. This is what Nora says, I'm using her words here. The spoken word remains a critical currency for thought exchange, thought production and exchange. Doesn't mean that people are not going to use technology, that they have other ways of communicating. Technology is just augmenting all these things, all these perspectives. So as we emphasize the importance of the community perspectives in policy formulation, there is still the unresolved question, which I asked earlier on. Do people always know what is best for them? In one of his last interviews, Paulo Freire discussed the notion of listening as a moral, political, and ethical duty. What he meant was that listening should not be mistaken for naivety. That perhaps one is compelled to agree with everything so as to avoid offending our collaborators. No. We have to disagree with people, but we have to find a way of disagreeing with people so that we can continue having the conversation tomorrow. When we listen, we do not do so in order to condemn or agree. No, agree. Rather, we do so in order to learn. So this concept that I'm advancing in my forthcoming book, the concept of pedagogy of listening, refers to the learning environment that is born of speaking and listening, the aim being to enrich our understanding of people, of issues, places, and the world. So we listen not because we feel compelled to, we feel obligated to. We listen not necessarily because we want to make other people happy, but we listen in order to increase our knowledge, increase our understanding of issues. And that's the essence of Nora's work. That's how I summarize and understand it. That we don't just go there to do work because an organization is just demanding that we do that. What happens afterwards? But we are doing it largely because we love this work. I would like you, and this is my call to you, to love what you do. Apart from the fact that it will take you places, it will get you good jobs, but it's beautiful work to work with people and to do things together and fail in the process, because failure is an important aspect, and I want to believe that the faculty here in the College of Development Communication also emphasize failure, because there is so much pressure on young people today when they're studying to succeed. You find young people want to buy the most expensive cars, they want to live the most expensive lifestyles, they want to succeed all the time, they're doing everything. But failure is a critical component of learning. We have to celebrate it. Listening is much more than keeping quiet when one is speaking. Listening requires that we enter into a discursive communion with others in order to appreciate knowledge from their perspective, not as a way of reaffirming and strengthening our position, but rather to ensure that we understand them much better. So even if there was a person who is racist or who believes that beating women is right, we are obligated to listen to them, because it offers us an opportunity to learn how they look at things, and in doing so, consolidate our own understanding, and perhaps help us to actually rethink the strategies of communicating about this issue. So in the work you do, in the work you're going to do in the future, you will meet a lot of people that are going to say repulsive things, that are going to believe in things that you never believed should be believed. But take time to listen to them, sit down with them, have lunch with them, have tea with them. Because by doing so, you enrich your own understanding about a particular issue. In my conversations with C4T scholars and practitioners who acknowledge and appreciate the pioneering role of the University of the Philippines and Los Baños in defining communications for development as a discipline of study, there is a renewed commitment to critical pedagogy, one that involves acknowledging and incorporating knowledge and expertise of industry practitioners, subject matter specialists, indigenous knowledge institutions, and of course, community organizations. These are all vital stakeholders that allow us to reshape and redefine our teaching philosophies, the teaching content, as well as the teaching outcomes. As curated by the University of the Philippines at Los Baños, especially within the College of Development Communication, listening is a fundamental building block of teaching and research in communication for development. The graduates here, this is what I learned about you. Maybe people lie, so you correct me. The graduates here have a reputation for being well-grounded in videos, who have mastered the theory, but also understand its relevance and are good at integrating it into practice. That's what they say, a lot of people say about you. In this case, what they mean is that you are very good at listening. I don't know if you agree with that, but that's what they're saying about you. So, in my language, listening is not just about hearing others. It is about seeing them with our own eyes. It's about finding them as if we can't see, like in the dark, finding them as people. When we tell someone, I hear you, we are also saying, I see you. And thus are acknowledging and respecting their humanity and their spirituality. This spirit should also be reflected in the way we design our research, we design our teaching, and we design our practice, wherever we go. So, what am I going to say in conclusion? As practitioners, as teachers, and as researchers in communication for development, we have the responsibility to speak with and to speak along the people that we work with. So, speaking with allows us, it gives us the opportunity to be humble. Because our responsibility is not to submerge the voices of the people that we're dealing with. It's to put them at par in terms of quality, in terms of relevance, in terms of significance, with our own thoughts. So sometimes we go in a place and we find a very different way of doing things. It's not a question of putting in quotation that this is what people say, but it's giving currency to the way they look at things, to the way they define the world, to the better shaum that makes them see things in a certain way, even if we disagree with it. For that to happen, we have to become very progressive thinkers as well as teachers. So, as a progressive teacher, we use these interactions with communities, with the students, as a site of resistance that allow communities, experts, subject matter specialists to contest the very notion of development itself. What it implies is we have to allow people to disagree with our own positions as experts. Because sometimes we go there with very fancy notions of what we think is going to work in the community. You go there and you say, look, we have statistics that prove that a lot of women are dying during childbirth here, which may be true. And we want to construct a clinic so that women can deliver in this clinic. So yes, the problem is there, and the people in the community will also have noted that a lot of women are dying during childbirth. I'm not saying a clinic is not a solution, it could be a solution, but you can approach it in a different way. We have noted in our reports that a lot of women are dying during childbirth. Why is it happening? That's the first question. And what do you think should be done about this problem? And you find that, of course, they may come up with a clinic in the end, but they will be taken through the process of thinking about this problem, such that if a similar problem arose in the future, they will have learned the process of thinking through their own problems. So you allow the development, the expansion of the epistemological foundation of how problems are seen, defined, and solved. The last point, which I think is very important, is that in the long term, this implies that we, all of us who are here, should go beyond what is celebrated as dominant and accepted structure and content on the subject, replacing and transgressing authoritative pieces on the subject. We should question, always doubt. Cogito ergo sum. I don't know if some of you have studied philosophy. It's important to doubt, raise doubt about some of the very basic things that we think about, whether it is in development, social science, gender. We need to raise questions about this dominant development thinking. We should allow for spaces that allow for transforming the worldview of the student. And by student, I'm not just referring to you, I'm referring to students of society. And this combines the radical curricula, the questions that are asked of and by the students, the activities, as well as the program that is created in order to allow for the contestation of this notion of development. Now, to close this discussion, if anybody were to ask you, anywhere, you know, Nora Kebro is celebrated as a pioneer of communication for development or development communication. What did she talk about? What is the fundamental ethos of her work? I think I'll be comfortable if you say it, or a lot of people will be comfortable if you say it's about listening. That's what our work was about. That's how I summarize our work. It's about listening. Listening to other people, listening to ourselves, but also listening to the discourse within which policies are curated and implemented. I'm talking about a homogeneous notion, a pluralistic concept, a holistic, a very rich concept of listening as an act of faith, that allows us to express our belief in the humanity of people that we are working with, as an act of faith that allows us to express our belief that whatever is happening today, the sun is always going to shine tomorrow, no matter how deep the problem is. As an act of faith, in that we are enjoying the work we are doing, and we believe in all this work. So that, in the end, we might speak with the Spanish poet Antonio Machado, who says, "Traveler, you make the road you walk." Thank you very much.
Hi, Linji. I'm Winnie Dagli. Sorry if I haven't replied to that very important email of yours, but I'm very happy to see you in our lecture room here in Devcom. I was so inspired by your speech, and I was really hoping that how I wish I can explain development the way you explained it. Like I can see and I can feel here in the room how you fire up uh, students here and both graduate students and undergraduate students. And I'm also happy to see that many of the things that you've shared with us, somehow we tried here in the college to discuss it inside the classroom, as well as try to also marry those perspectives inside the classroom with what we do outside in the field. Okay, but I just want to make a comment about the idea of understanding people's standpoint and people's perspective. Because this is something that I mentioned to my Devcom 101 class when we discussed standpoint theory in the class, and we're tackling the critical tradition in communication theory these past few meetings. And I just want to imagine that that curriculum, that kind of curriculum of DevCom, that maybe we can shape the curriculum of DevCom both for the undergrad, maybe for the graduates as well, from the standpoint of the oppressed, from the standpoint of the marginalized. But you also cautioned us with the idea that maybe we can listen to different perspectives and not just to the standpoint of the oppressed, but we can also um, be more inclusive and include the private sector, the NGO workers, people from the government. But I think once we review the curriculum of DevCom and try to see how we can reshape it from from the standpoint of the oppressed, I'm pretty sure we're going to see a different kind of curriculum, the content, the way we deliver the courses, the way we value field work, even the amount of hours that we spent um, on the field and inside the classroom, as well as the theories that we discuss inside the classroom. Perhaps we don't have to, go through everything, all these theories, but maybe we can just select a few, mainly because you said what we're doing is political, and so we can be more political in the way we do things as well. And I think that's also very clear in Mom Nora Cabral's definition. And the idea as well that in that particular curriculum, drawn from the standpoint of the oppressed, we can give more privilege to people's standpoint and their life world, and maybe theories, especially from the academic community, and especially if they're not drawn from our experience here in the Philippines or in the developing countries, they might come as just secondary. But of course, they're important. But maybe it's about time to revisit both the theory and the method. And I'm particularly thankful for you because rarely do we discuss the methods of DevCom. And I think the pedagogy of listening is a good first step, no, or a step towards understanding our ethos, the methods of development communication. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if I can, you want me to comment? Yeah, I mean, look, every choice we make when it comes to curriculum is going to be very political. So when I started teaching at the London School of Economics in 2008, the Devcom Masters, I was the first lecturer on the Devcom program, the Masters in Communication for Development. And I had to decide two things. The first thing was to recognize that the program was not based in a development studies department or an agriculture development department. So I had to consciously choose my readings in order to find a space to teach Nora Gebro. So the conscious decision I made as part of teaching Nora Gebro was to bring in Marxist thinkers. So I brought in Marx himself. I also brought in, very importantly, Arturo Escobar. He writes really beautifully about development. So I brought in Arturo Escobar. Because when students really have a critical understanding of development, then it's very easy, it becomes very easy and palatable for them to understand the work of Gebro. Not that the work of Gebro is difficult, but the context in which that work is written is the supported context. It's the context of the South itself. So you have to give work, you have to give Nora's work a certain political context that will allow you to teach it properly. And I agree with you. It's very important to take care in terms of the readings that we choose to be in a program, the readings that we choose to be in a curriculum. In fact, one of the greatest lessons that the financial crisis of 2008 has taught us is that there was a preeminence of one classic economic paradigm being emphasized in certain universities, especially in the social sciences. And students were not given the privilege, the opportunity to learn about other ways of knowing things, other ways of looking at the world. I mean, if you take China, for example, there is a huge body of social science literature that is never taught in Western university. If you take Southeast Asia, for example, it's a whole region that has its own taste, its own feeling, its own approach towards the social sciences. So a good teacher should take the sacred duty of choosing the material deliberately to allow students to understand that as a teacher, you're not the last authority on the subject. Now, a lot of teachers find that very hard. Because most of the time we teach, we want to be experts, we want to be seen as experts. We don't want to present ourselves as being vulnerable in the face of the material that we are teaching. But I can tell you there is nothing more enjoyable than being vulnerable in the face of difficult literature, different literature. And I think we owe it to the students to give them something different to what has already been taught about the subject. And a question, I'm going to disappear. I can take 2 more questions. Anything you want to ask me? This is your chance. Ask me even whether it's a question in media, in history, in sociology, anything you want to ask me. Okay. I'm going to ask you a question. Should I? I want to ask you a question. You know, in development communication, we talk about empowerment a lot. Now, if you look at that word empowerment, right in the middle is the word power. Why do you think it's important for students of society to think about power in communication for development? Why is it important that we give adequate consideration to power, to notions of power, to theories of power? Okay, you can think about it. Next time I come here. Next time I come here, we're going to talk about power. I'm going to talk about power, and then we can talk about power. But that's a question I want to leave with you as you talk about your lunch or dinner, whatever. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Dr. Banyoso, and thank you very much for visiting the College of Development Communication. Perhaps we can give him one more lively round of applause. And thank you for coming, and thank you for filling up LR1. Madyan, parang gusto magpa-photo. I think they want to photo.
Yeah.
Punta na dito, sa harap. Everybody.